OpenAI inference cluster is still processing your conversations right now, and the FTC can't locate it. That's not a metaphor. Every prompt you type routes through a distributed compute mesh that doesn't exist at a fixed address, in a fixed country, or under a single jurisdiction. The Federal Trade Commission opened a formal investigation. They requested the documentation. OpenAI's legal team sent back a network diagram. The cluster on that diagram doesn't match what's running. Officially, OpenAI's compute lives on Microsoft Azure. That's the public story, and it's technically true, in the same way that a shadow is technically attached to the body casting it. Microsoft invested $13 billion across a multi-year partnership that handed OpenAI priority access to Azure's global supercomputing footprint. The system exists to train large language models and serve ChatGPT to over 200 million weekly users. The compute requirement is enormous. Hundreds of thousands of A100 and H100 GPUs burning continuously to keep inference latency under a second. OpenAI calls this infrastructure the Azure OpenAI Service. The arrangement is well documented in press releases. What isn't documented is where the actual inference endpoints resolve. Here's what the routing logs show when researchers and independent infrastructure auditors actually trace the traffic. A prompt typed into ChatGPT doesn't hit a data center. It hits a telemetry handshake layer, a lightweight routing node that forwards the request based on real-time load balancing across a geographically distributed mesh. That mesh spans Azure regions, yes, but it also routes through compute nodes in facilities that Azure doesn't publicly list as part of its sovereign cloud boundary. Inference runs have been traced to endpoints in undisclosed co-located facilities, third-party data centers where Microsoft leases rack space under non-disclosure agreements. Your conversation, your persistent identifier, your full query string, those aren't staying in a clearly mapped region. They're transiting infrastructure that doesn't appear on any data residency map OpenAI has published. And the RLHF pipeline, the system that uses your interactions to continuously improve the model, that runs on a separate distributed training cluster, one whose physical location has never been independently confirmed. The Federal Trade Commission flagged this in 2023. The investigation that followed was one of the broadest tech probes since the Facebook Cambridge Analytica inquiry. The FTC issued a civil investigative demand, a legal order compelling OpenAI to produce records on data handling, training pipelines, and infrastructure. OpenAI's response took months. When it arrived, it described compute infrastructure in broad architectural terms. The FTC asked a follow-up, where physically does training data land during fine-tuning runs? The answer they got back cited Azure's standard terms of service. The commission couldn't independently audit the physical infrastructure. They don't have that authority, and OpenAI knew it. Here's the part nobody reported. The toothlessness was designed into the structure, not discovered after the fact. OpenAI is not a standard corporation. It's a cap-profit LLC controlled by a nonprofit parent. That structure, combined with Microsoft's role as the primary compute provider, creates a regulatory gap that no single agency can close. The FTC oversees consumer protection. It can probe data practices, but it cannot compel a third-party cloud provider to open its data centers for inspection. The cloud provider is Microsoft. Microsoft's infrastructure is subject to its own enterprise agreements and sovereign cloud certifications negotiated jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So the compute cluster, the one doing the actual inference on your data, running the actual RLHF checkpoints syncing off your conversation patterns, exists in a legal and physical space that neither the FTC nor GDPR enforcement bodies, nor the EU AI Act oversight framework can reach simultaneously. Each regulator sees one slice. No single body sees the whole mesh. That's not an accident. OpenAI's legal architecture and its infrastructure architecture were built in parallel. The cluster nobody can locate isn't hidden because the technology is exotic. It's hidden because the entity structure makes complete visibility legally impossible. and it's still running. Every conversation you've had with ChatGPT, every prompt, every document you pasted in, every personal detail you disclosed while asking for help, ran through inference endpoints whose physical location you cannot verify and no regulator has independently confirmed. If you're in the EU, your data may or may not have stayed within GDPR-compliant boundaries during its inference pass. OpenAI publishes data residency options. Those options apply to Azure's certified regions. They don't speak to the co-location facilities in the routing mesh. You accepted a privacy policy. That policy was written around the public infrastructure. The actual infrastructure is something else. And the checkpoint sync, the continuous process that feeds your interactions back into the training loop, that ping never stopped. So here's what nobody will answer. Who approved the co-located routing nodes that don't appear on OpenAI's data map? Was it Microsoft's infrastructure team? OpenAI's engineering leads? Or is the answer that nobody explicitly approved them, because in a distributed system that scales automatically, nobody has to? And if that's true, is there anyone anywhere who actually knows every facility your data has touched?